Heads up, the energetics of psilocybin and herbal medicine, remembering and restoring the missing piece in contemporary psychedelic practice, is open soon. You can learn more at the link right here in the show notes. The doors open in March. We begin in March. This is a live 6-week group training program for space holders, guides, explorers, and just psychedelic enthusiasts. If you want to learn the missing pieces that maybe you haven't learned in other training programs around the energetics of psilocybin, the bridge to the human body, other various plant medicines and herbal allies, and learn about Grandma's Witchy Toolkit, which I can guarantee will help you immensely in your space holding and your own personal practice. I am so excited to finally be offering this after dreaming of doing this for years. Sam Perry is a very good friend of mine. He's an absolute genius, and he's very enjoyable to learn from. We've made this program short and accessible and lots of fun, and I hope to see you soon. Just sign up at this link right here to learn more and be notified when the doors open. The psychedelic revolution is here. If you want to integrate your visionary experiences into your purpose, get clear on your entrepreneurial path, and help people while you do what you love, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to The Psychedelic Entrepreneur, Medicine for These Times. I'm your host, Beth Weinstein. I'm a spiritual business coach, 3-time entrepreneur, and a lifelong student of psychedelics and sacred plant medicines. You carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times. This podcast will help you to share your medicine so you can create transformation in the world. Listen in on conversations with psychedelic leaders, changemakers, and conscious entrepreneurs who are living proof that a better world is possible when you follow your heart and live in alignment with your soul. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I have my friend Sam Perry with us today, and we are going to be speaking about psilocybin. Before we get started, I just want to mention that Sam and I are hosting a very exciting program coming up very soon. You can sign up for my email list to be notified about it. Right now, we don't actually have the exact title yet, but it's all about the energetics of psilocybin, which we're going to go into a little bit today. But before we get in, Sam, it's so good to have you here.
Oh, Beth, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited for this.
I'm so excited. So I have known Sam, I don't know how long, 8-9 years, something like that. I don't know. That's my guess. And the first time I was learning from you, I think was on one of your retreats at Ravencrest, where you teach herbalism and flower essences and all about plants and plant spirits. And I think I had said, wow, this guy could be a really famous YouTuber if he really wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I've been learning from you ever since, and it's just such an honor to have you here. So my first question to all my guests is, I know a little bits of your story, which has always been so interesting to hear about, but let me ask, how did you get to where you're at today? And first, tell people, what is it you do out there in the world? What's your, soul's purpose and your vocation?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. And I guess what I would say is that I'm an herbalist, first and foremost. And a lot of people don't maybe know what that is. I'm assuming your audience really probably is familiar with herbalism, but it is a life practice of working in harmony with the plants and with people. And I work as a clinical herbalist, which means that I help people with their medical concerns. And we sit together and we work with connecting folks, the plants and the people. So in some ways, I think of myself as a matchmaker. My job is to learn a lot about the plants and to learn a lot about people, and then find the ones that will really help a certain person with a certain concern. And so that's my work is as a clinical herbalist. And I'm also teaching, really engaged mostly teaching herbalism, and very excited that this has become a path that more and more people are opening to and really seeking out a way to find the plants and I guess I would say it like this, that so many of us are aware of the struggle of what's going on in this world and how much we want to help. And it is a real blessing to have a path. And I feel very fortunate to have this path of herbalism and to be able to share it through teaching. And so I'm teaching at Arbor Vitae School of Traditional Herbalism, which is based in New Paltz, New York. Yeah.
And then you also teach your little crew. What do you call this crew?
Oh, we have we call it the Earthling Study Group. And what we're doing is we're all studying to be Earthlings, because here we are, we took this precious human birth, and I don't know about you, Beth, but I didn't get an instruction manual, and we're kind of working together to figure out what it is that an Earthling does. Now it's more people from all over and just sharing about the different medicine traditions. Currently, we're working with the traditions of Europe and doing a deep dive into the roots of science within alchemy. And Renaissance magic is about where we are now. We're with Marsilio Ficino in the Hermetic, Platonic, Neoplatonic Renaissance. It's pretty heady stuff, which is different than some days we talk about drinking tea, but we're in this sort of vibe at the moment.
So good.
Yeah.
Well, Sam, let's hear a little about how did you get here? How did you make working with plants and humans and the systems you're living, what was your path and what do you think contributed to this career that you've kind of set forward for so long?
Yeah, great blessings, really, really. I've done many, many jobs in my life. I've had a pretty eventful and interesting sort of winding path. And I've always been drawn to the plants. I was very fortunate that in my family, people had gardens. People drank tea. People went for walks in the woods and appreciated being outside. And we allowed the mystery of the living world to be something we spoke about and cared about. And so it carried me through all of my different paths I've traveled down. And it was a real blessing to learn that one could study this. One could really engage fully in herbalism and an herbal path. And it's about, I'm not so good with dates, but I think it's between 12 and 15 years ago that rather than just having it be something on the side, something that connected me, frankly, to my grandparents and the older generations in my family, and I thought of them. And I was living in New York City. I was going into herb shops, talking to people about plants, but I always thought of it as sort of a hobby or something that, was like kind of on the side. And one day I went into an herb shop, a great herb shop in New York City that's really influenced a lot of people. It's called Flower Power. And there was the owner of the shop knew me because I'd been coming in for years, and she handed me the flyer and said, "There's a school opening up. You could really study this." And the open house they were having was, I think, like maybe the next day. And I just knew. I went to that open house and I just decided to go to school and properly train. And that was the very beginning of that school. That's the school Arbor Vitae I now teach for. And this was their first class. It was a small group of us. But I made that commitment when I realized that there were folks who were willing to teach it and that I could study it earnestly. And it really brought together so many aspects of my life. And it's funny because I see that now with the students we have. We're about to have an open house later this evening with for prospective students to come into our fall year. And I just think how important it is to find one's path. It's a blessing. And to now be in a position to hand back and to teach that and to bring people along and encourage them gives me a lot of joy.
Beautiful. Oh my God, I love that. I didn't know the details of that story.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, when it comes to your path with these entheogenic medicines, sacred mushrooms, any others, When did that all start? Did you have the kind of high school experience, or or even other entheogenic experiences without plants? What do you believe set you on the path with this kind of exploration?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and it's such an interesting thing whenever we talk to folks in these ways to find out how we first encountered. I'm always so curious, and I appreciate that question, because for me, I'm glad you mentioned this, that it was, as the good old Terence McKenna would say, it was on the natch. It was a natural, spontaneous experience that I had as a child, that we would probably describe as altered state or something like this. And it was something that happened quite young. I was about 4 years old, and I was sitting under a pine tree. And it was sort of my spot, like a little kid. And my house, I was living at that time in my grandparents' house, and there were lots of people around, and it was quite busy, and a lot of adults saying a lot of loud things, So I would kind of sneak off and be in my little safe spot in the pine tree, and I could lean up against the pine and be sort of protected. I remember one day I was leaning against the tree. My eyes were open, and I was looking up, and suddenly, watching the spirals of the branches, the pine tree, it was a white pine. We call it in Latin, its botanical name is Pinus strobus, like a strobe light. Strobus, it turns, right? And anybody who's seen a pine tree, a white pine especially, which is very sacred to our region, it's really a very central tree to our tradition here in the Northeast. Somehow the spiral motion and me sitting there, it was a hot summer day. I kind of looked up, and then suddenly I was flying, and I was in the air. I was, this house that my grandparents lived at was, it's in the Jersey Shore, on the Jersey Shore. It's on not the beach, but the bay. And I was above the water, and I could see our house, and I could see everything like this, and was flying. I didn't know how to really think about it, but it kind of set me on this path in a way of herbalism. But also I like to think, and maybe we'll come back to this, it's an important way I see it, but entheogens or psychedelic plants or these teacher plants, they're part of herbalism for me. They're part of the plant kingdom, the fungi kingdom. But I came back from that experience as a little kid, and I came into the house, and I went to my grandmother, and there were lots of people talking, and I very excitedly said, the pine tree is teaching me how to fly. And, in the wisdom of grannies and our elders, right? Loudly across the room to let everybody know that she had this under control, and don't worry, the little weird dreaming child was not going to get away with this for too long. She said, "Oh, you have all this pine sap on you. You're making a mess. Don't bring that into my house," And she leaned over I had all sorts of pine sap on my back from leaning against the tree in the hot sun. And she sort of brushed the pine sap off my little butt, and she whispered in my ear, and she said, "The pine tree is teaching you to pray."
Oh my God.
And it was very interesting. It's something I've seen about a lot of teachers. And my grandma, I consider my teacher. And this ability to have a sort of public way we talk about it, and then sort of a secret, maybe esoteric, but it's just natural. It's just human. How you would talk to a kid, like maybe she realized I was a little embarrassed. Everybody was looking at me. I made a scene. I'm flying or whatever. And she brushed it off and said, "It's pine tree's teaching you how to pray." And so, that encouraged me to look for that kind of experience, to be welcome to it. And, it kept with me. So by the time, I know you mentioned a high school experience, and yes, certainly indeed, I had plenty of high school experiences, but I was lucky to always bring those back to this experience and other experiences I knew, where I was able to connect to something more, something bigger, something that, I felt a longing for. And I was trying to find other people who would talk openly about it. And I guess I was about 12, 13, maybe 14, somewhere in there. We had this great radio station freeform radio station. It doesn't really exist. This station does still exist, but it's hard to find. New Jersey, wonderful radio station, WFMU, out of Jersey City. You know it, Beth? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, and on Thursdays at 6:00, they played Alan Watts.
Wow.
I didn't know who Alan Watts was, but I listened to that station because it was just always interesting. It was weird, you know. You could have any kind of music you think of, and at 6:00 there'd be this old English man with a smoker's cough and the best laugh I'd ever heard, talking about the Tao, talking about Buddhism, especially Zen Buddhism, and my siblings and I, we had like a who got to pick what we would listen to at dinner time. We were in charge of cooking dinner, the kids, you know. And so we had my sister's pink boombox, very 1980s, pink boombox. And my pick was on Thursday. We just listened to this guy, you know, talk. And I guess I think I'm probably 12. And just listening to Alan Watts talk about this, about Buddhism, it really brought me to Buddhism, which is a huge part of my path. And also, I got this book that he wrote called The Joyous Cosmology. People don't really know that aspect of Alan Watts. I find people who know it in the Dharma, they know him as a Buddhist teacher, but he wrote a wonderful book, sort of like Aldous Huxley's Doors of Perception, about his early experiments. This is Alan Watts' experiences with LSD and mescaline, and connected it to the Buddhist path. And I got it. You know, New York City, I got it at one of the little book stands they used to have by Washington Square Park, where you could buy a book for like $1. All these old hippies would sell you cool stuff for nothing. And I connected this name, The Joyous Cosmology, with this cool voice on the radio. And then it just became a search for me. It was like, who else is going to talk openly about this? And where do I get it? You know, it was always the question of a teenager. It's like, okay, I want to access this stuff, but like, who's got it? Who's holding, you know? So that leads you around, you know, and you start finding out, I got access to some of the pharmacon.
Which one was your first? I'm curious.
Well, I don't want to leave out dear cannabis, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Cannabis is an incredible teacher and a dear ally and friend. And, I believe cannabis would certainly be first, and tobacco, another important plant teacher. But I first got LSD. It would have been, this is going to date me, right? But the Grateful Dead still existed as the actual Grateful Dead. And, you know, anybody who knows anything about the Grateful Dead, like, incredible music, incredible community, and you can get whatever you were looking for. It doesn't matter if you're 14 or 15 years old. And I saw Bob Dylan open for Grateful Dead. It would have been 94 or 95, somewhere in there. Wow. And also went home with a little stash of goodie that my friends and I went off into the woods and dutifully explored. And it was incredible. By that time I had read a lot of the beat poets and the hippie poets. And for me, it was connecting to the culture of the people I loved. And I could see that they had this power. They had this interesting, vital energy. And, you know, we knew it was illegal, but that doesn't stop a 14-year-old. And we knew that it was, we also knew it was sacred. So I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah. It's a long rambling story.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's polar opposite of how I came to all these.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Mine was like, I know nothing. Let me take it. Okay. Wow. What was that? Yeah. I mean, I had heard, like the words, and I had smoked, I think a few times some cannabis. So I had experienced being like a little high, but not crazy high. And then someone offered me a hit of acid, and I was 14. And I was always, I still am always kind of like a yes kind of person. Like, sure, I'm curious. And I always tell this. I've told this story before, and I've written an article about it. Actually, Rick Doblin of Maps asked me to write an article about it, and then I don't know whatever happened. They haven't published it yet. But I had a curfew and I had to go home, and I didn't want to get in trouble because I was never missed my curfew. I was a fairly good kid, except all the drugs. And the guy who offered me this, who by the way I didn't actually know, I had just met him. I was like, oh, let me save it for later, and he's like, no, you have to take it right now. I don't know why he said that. Probably because he thought I would stick around. I didn't even think about it. I took it, and then I had to leave in like 15 minutes because I had to go home.
Oh, no.
And so I got home and I went to brush my teeth and, get ready for bed. And I think I had forgotten that I had taken this thing like completely because, 14 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm brushing my teeth, looking in the mirror, and that's when everything kicked in and started to change. And I was like, and at first I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And then like hours later, I was like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? It's like, when is this going to end? I had no idea how long it was going to be. So I spent my whole first psychedelic journey was spent laying in my bed, in my bedroom with my parents down the hall, or whoever it was. I don't remember who was there at the time. It was some form of a parent or stepfather. I have no idea. And my brother, I think, in the room next door. And I had to be quiet the whole time. Couldn't play music, couldn't do anything. So I just laid there and went inward. And that's when I say that, thank God for that journey, because I had nothing else to do other than be like, I just remember being like, I think we don't know what we are capable of. That was like the first insight. I was like, pretty sure our mind is able to tap into so many other realms. And by the way, like you, I had what I would call an entheogenic experience when I was probably, I don't know the age, but it was probably like 7 or 8. Mm-hmm. And I never know how to describe it other than now the word I would say is just some kind of like spiritual activation. But I had I would lay on the ground. Like I was very connected to the earth. I was, always outside as a kid. Thank God, the plants were my savior. Like I hid in the bushes and, I always drew up plans for our garden because I wanted to expand it. But we had, fruit trees. I grew up in California. But I was laying there on the grass looking at the clouds, which I would do all the time. And I had this experience that I don't know how to describe it. It was like light coming in and some kind of like energetic activation. And then it was kind of just like an awareness, like an awareness. And I used to lay there and wonder like what is inside of our brain. Like I wanted to understand like what was going on in here. And that was years before the psychedelic journey. And then the psychedelic journey was like, oh, now I'm even more curious as to what's really going on in there. Cause like there's so much more that we don't know about. And then I went and studied it in college, and then here I am today. So
yes,
I love it.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah. So let me ask, here we are. I've dreamed of hosting this program about the energetics of, I used to say, I want to teach a class about the energetics of psychedelics. Mm-hmm. And I've been talking about this for a few years. The problem is I never felt qualified enough. I mean, I know a fair amount, but not a lot.
Yes, you do.
And I had mentioned this to a couple people. There was a friend of mine who does energy work, but then she didn't know enough about the actual psychedelics. And then someone else I talked to was like kind of on board and then kind of fell off. And I kept saying, as someone who's been sitting in these spaces and working with these substances and these different plant medicines for, over 30 years, and I think yours probably adds up to about, right? 20 something, 30 years.
Pretty close. Yeah. Yikes.
It's like up there. I was like, I've had a lot of clients go through a lot of the psychedelic training programs. I have friends that run trainings, and they're all, they all have different styles, but I think very few of them get into the other realms, the energetics, the somatics. One of my former clients right now is teaching a class on mythopoetic integration. Shout out to Simon Ugler, by the way. And which I was like, oh my God, we need this, because how many of these training programs are getting into, depth psychology or, symbolism. And so anyways, I've dreamed this up, and then I think, you and I have sat in spaces together and have journeyed together. And by the way, I've been on your meditation retreats, which is a journey in itself. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I would watch you pull out this kind of like secret, what I'm calling like the witchy grandma kit.
Yes.
And I'd be like, what do you have in there? Mm-hmm. What do you know that we don't know? I've been in ceremonies and psychedelic spaces for so long, and you were the first person that had different options. Like if someone was having a really hard time or something on the verge of potentially unsafe was happening, or someone's freaking out because their heart is racing too fast, or whatever it is, you would be there with all these like formulas. And I was like, we need to learn about this, because I don't know anyone that knows about any of these. So let's talk about this path of being a psychedelic explorer, and then what you've learned all these years. Like, I'm curious, how did you yourself find all these, this grandma's herbal kit? Like, was it through your own, like, how did this come about through your own exploration in, with medicine and psilocybin? Yes.
No, it's such a fascinating thing. And I'm just delighted that we're doing this and that we're going to share this with people. I really see a need for this, and it makes me so happy that we're going to get out some information that is so basic and so obvious and so easy to incorporate. And that's precisely why I think people don't trust it or don't look for it, because it seems that, we should always psychologize or make something really grand or medicalize it. And it might slip our consciousness that our elders who use soup and tea and breath practices, they didn't call them breath practices. They might have called it prayer. They might have called it sitting quietly. All of these traditional ways of being are holding us all the time. And so, it's really the study of herbalism for me. I think that within herbalism, which is a vast, vast field, there really is, every one of us is an herbalist. If you ate shredded wheat for breakfast, you're an herbalist. If you live in a house made out of a tree, you're an herbalist. If you breathe oxygen and enjoy that practice, you're an herbalist. We're all here in relation with the living world, and we all have ancestry that knew this. Wherever we're from, wherever we find ourselves now in the adventure we're all on, we are connected. And when I was able to start studying plant medicine, and by plant medicine, I include all the plants. When I say plant medicine, I don't just mean a few special secret teaching plants. They're part of the plant medicine community. When I mentioned, finding training in herbalism, I had for years been working on my own psychedelic explorations. And that's a lot of what I was learning about in the herbal shops was, this is a relaxing herb. This is an herb that will let you feel uplifted without overly stimulating you. And what I was learning is that, I would share that with friends. I would say, hey, this herb makes me feel really clear and vibrant. You should try it. And then the friend would say, actually, that herb makes me feel a little bit anxious and overstimulated. And it's like, well, is it the plant or is it the person that's taking the plant? And it's always the relationship. This is a relational practice. And so that was my work. And then coming into, doing many jobs I've had, coming into actually studying and giving my life to the path of herbalism, we have a language for this, and we call it the energetics. And it's a confusing term. It's a very confusing term because we all hear about energy in so many ways. It's really what we're all talking about. But energetics is really studying the direction and the way which things move. So we might have something that's hot because it causes us to be hot. It heats us, but it also might cause us to feel a little bit anxious or irritated. We have something that's cold that might cool us down. So if we are in an anxious or agitated state, it might make us feel, oh, like I have a little bit more space. I can be more patient with what's arising. Or, if we're too cold, it might lead us to kind of a stagnant depression sort of, right? And so these are energetic patterns that we can observe, and they are in every medicine tradition of heating plants, cooling plants, or plants that are moistening, plants that are demulcent, which means that they soften tissue, or plants that are mineralizing, they strengthen tissue. And so, I've been lucky. I've been very lucky that I've been able to sit in a lot of different spaces. And I love the work that we do in sacred space. I am so ever grateful for it. And yeah, for me, you bring your kit, because there might be something where you need a little bit of help. And so if it's been many years now where I just have my little kit, my granny witchy bag, as you called it, and I like that very much, I would offer it to people. I would just observe. And if someone was having a hard time, I would offer, this remedy or that remedy in the right frame. I'm not driving that ship. I'm a participant in the ship. But if I can offer that, that's helpful. And, it's over many years of learning. When I pack my kit for some adventuring, what am I going to bring? And realizing there really is an energetics to this work. And that's really what I'm excited to teach, because it is needed. It's the missing piece. And I think it's a lot of what rightfully is being called out in the psychedelic space, is that people tend to extract the constituent, the potent medicine, the chemistry that they're all excited about. Oh, it's got DMT, or it's got psilocin, or whatever the chemistry. And I love chemistry. I think chemistry is fascinating. But it's one model. And the thing that's really necessary for our communities to hear, and really not just hear and pay lip service to hear that the reason this can get very ungrounded is because it's not held within a living tradition. And that does not mean we go and try to grab someone else's living tradition and put it on like a costume. That is not at all what we're talking about. We're talking about the wound. We're talking about why isn't there a living tradition to hold it for certain communities? And I just feel like it's coming together so clearly for me that it's having an awareness of the living world, and knowing this plant will cause me to be able to warm up. This plant will cause me to relax and give me that ability. All plants are teacher plants. All plants have teaching and directionality. Just like all of us, we're all individuals. We all have very unique, and I would like to say peculiar abilities, traits, and certain people we are gravitating towards because they offer that medicine to us. And others are offering a different medicine. And so it is with the plants. So learning that when we are in a sacred space, like we've been talking about, we want to be challenged. We actually need to be challenged. We need to go in with big questions. We need to be very courageous and brave. No one does that work if they're not. And if they tried to, if they're just along for the giggle and the ride, well, they get their butt handed to them. And we see that. And then hopefully they come back with a little more respect and a little bit more question, a little bit more opening. So I don't want to sanitize it and make it safe. I want to make sure that we can hold everybody in intensity. And this is very related to the practices we do in meditation too. How to be at the edge of our lives. Well, maybe it involves breathing. I like to bring this into meditation retreats, by the way, too. We often have the kit right in the back of the room in case someone has an experience they need that too. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing. This was actually going to be one of my questions was, so let's say someone's going into a one-on-one space. Like there's a lot of people listening that are, let's say, facilitators or space holders or underground therapists or even above ground therapists who do one-on-one work with people who maybe tend to take higher doses for, like going in with real healing intentions. So like you just said, it's like we need to have the challenging experience, but like if someone has this toolkit, does it just take it away? You know, like what's the point of it, and how can someone, benefit from knowing these different tools, these other plants, these other remedies? You know, like why would it help if part of it's like, oh, well, the only way through is through? Like there is kind of that attitude in the psychedelic space where it's like, well, every bad trip is a good trip. And, you know, I mean, I've always kind of believed that too. It's like, well, until someone dies, that's not a good trip. But like, you know, there's definitely people have hard trips and bad trips, and then they turn out to be amazing. But like, why would someone holding space want to know about what you were just talking about?
We all take risks. We have to take risks to be at the edge. But some of us are reckless. Some of us are reckless. And the thing is that it's just young. That's what this is. This tradition is young. It's not unworthy. It doesn't need to be stuffed because it's not an ancient tradition. We need to connect with the ancientness within the tradition. And especially, just to speak to the psychedelic assisted therapy, that model is very young. And that model is, because it is science-minded for the most part, it has scrubbed a lot of the, oh, we don't need that. That's just anthropology. That view is not helpful, because that anthropology is the medicine. If someone's going to listen to music on headphones and a playlist, that's fine. But that's not what our ancestors would have done. If someone is going to sit on a couch with a blindfold, that's fine. Lie on a couch. But that's not what our ancestors would have done. And if we're going to do that, we need to have things in place where our ancestors would have had those. And so it's not at all about making sure someone has a smooth and easy sailing. We want the risk. We need the challenge, but we don't want it to be reckless. And so what the plants offer is teaching. All of the plants offer teaching, and they teach us about our bodies. So if we have a hard time, we don't have an abstract, generalized hard time. We have a very specific hard time, peculiar and specific to our current circumstances. And if we find a plant ally that will help us through that hard time, maybe it's our heart racing very fast, especially in the takeoff period, where we're rising up and we're feeling a rushing, and we feel like we're almost going to be shot out of our body, like out of a cannon at the circus. Used to know some circus people. I've seen that trick a few times, right? You feel like you're being shot off, right? And the truth is, you're actually sitting or maybe lying with a blindfold on. You're not going to be shot off, but it can feel as if you are. And if your heart's racing in your chest, and there's a plant that we can give you that will allow your heart to slow down slightly, allow you to take a breath, and allow you to race. It still have that experience, but you feel prepared for it. You feel capable. You feel part of it. You don't feel like it's something happening to you, because it's not. It's relational. So we learn, oh, that's the plant that I took at that moment. That plant isn't just for that moment. That plant is now an ally for you for the rest of your life. And that plant is going to continue to teach you about your own body. So often we see in this, especially when we're working with the mind, we see people take the mind and like put it outside of the body. But guess what we're going to walk away from after our ceremony, after our sacred event? We're going to have a human body. And maybe if we had that heart racing in that moment, maybe we tend to heart race at other moments of our life. And maybe that teaching plant, which doesn't get big headlines, is going to teach us about why our body does that and how we might live in response to that in a gentler way with more ease. Is that making sense?
Yes.
That's how I think about it. We could go on, but I think that gives an idea of it.
Thank you. Well, what about the idea of being, let's say, in the middle of a really, I mean, we've all seen this. I think everybody listening has either had it or seen it themselves, where someone's like full on freaking out in the middle of a session or a ceremony. what then, like, let's say there's a plant or one of these grandma's witchy remedies for it. First of all, how do we know that it's safe? And how did you figure this out? And then, is the point to then get rid of the journey, if someone's freaking out, or is it just like, oh, it takes it down a notch, or what really happens with these kind of witchy remedies?
No, it's a subtle question, because there are some plants that we could use to help take it down a notch. If really someone cannot tolerate the experience, we can't end the experience. Time will come in. As distant as time might seem at the moment, time will come in, and time eats us all. We're all going to wake up in a world that we recognize, and but are we going to recognize ourselves, right? So the thing I want to say is that while there are some plants that we can use and some remedies that we can bring in to really do the best we can to sort of halt the experience or to take it down a notch, like you're suggesting. And that's traditional in many of the cultures that have their culture and their traditions around these plants intact. There's plenty of plants that are used in those ways and strategies, and we learn from those. But it is something that we come to by preparing for this work. So many, I hope that, and I know that your listeners are aware of all the diets that people are prescribed, which doesn't mean like going on a diet, like I'm going to eat less of this and I'm going to buy this expensive detox equipment. It does not mean that. What it means is paying attention to inputs and outputs. And we do that to get people aware, to really pay attention to what they're ingesting, how well they're processing, and what they're excreting, what they're letting go, right? And that awareness is the medicine. That awareness is the medicine. So the big experience that happens in the middle is just that. It's in the middle. So the diet that leads us up and the diet that takes us out of an experience is full of opportunity to learn about ourselves. And that's where those plants are. If we have a challenging experience, which we will, if we're lucky, we'll have a challenging experience. And if we're blessed, we're going to have a challenging experience that we rise to the occasion of. The plants are there to find out where we're stuck, where we're not able to rise like we would, where we're still closed off and blocked. Because it's a process. We are processes. We're not nouns, we're verbs. We're involved in a big process, an unfolding that's going on. It's rising and falling. And we're curious. We're curious about that process. So the plants aren't to take anything away. They're to remind us to be curious, to be learners. That's what makes us human, by the way. That's our gift as humans. We got these big old brains, We're so proud of our brains. They're big old homo sapiens, sapien. We call ourselves the wise homos, right? And out we come into the world with our giant heads and our big old brains. And, if you've seen a cow be born or a horse be born, or a goat or a sheep, they born and they start walking around. They're like, they got it. They know what they're up to. They're doing it. Not so with humans, because we're learners. We come in vulnerable, open. We come in really soft and curious. And we learn, hopefully we're all like, that's the goal, is to find teachers and to find, hopefully we got caught by someone who could care for us. And if we didn't, we found someone who could, right? But we're here to learn. That's the human thing, to learn. And so these medicines, especially when you look at the chemistry, which seems to be everybody's focus, unfortunately, is just the chemistry. What they do, the whole neuroplasticity bit, I don't see it as neuroplastic. I see it as biofluidity. Life flows. Life flows. Yeah, your neurons aren't plastic. You're part of life and you're moving, right? And so in that moving, that open, curious awareness, that's what the plants bring us to. They find, and someone who's trained in this way, which is what we're going to be offering, a training in how to think like this and how to know a good kit of remedies. It's not a huge amount of remedies, so that we can give the remedy that lets someone engage again from a place of open curiosity. Right? You're still going to be on an adventure, but hopefully you're kind of wonder, what's this?
Wow. I gotta try one of these days in a ceremony. Because I haven't remedied myself. Maybe a little with like a flower essence once in a while.
Yeah.
Just kind of that same idea where it's like, oh, okay, this essence maybe helps me just like ease into it when it feels like, whoa, I can't take this because it's really a lot. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're feeling inspired, I'd appreciate it if you showed your love with a review. And check out my YouTube channel where you can find the video version of this podcast. You can also head to bethaweinstein.com to learn more about me and grab my free business growth trainings. Remember, you carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times.